Hello, Namaskar. Welcome to my pod, the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis. My name is Juggi Bhasin. To become a subscriber, all you have to do is to press that red button on your screen, and subscription is, of course, completely free. Would also really appreciate if you could like this video and share this video with your friends. All right. So it's been quite a few days since Dharmendra has died, but surprise of surprises, even today, um, at least on my social media account, and I'm pretty sure on other people's social media accounts also, that is on Facebook and Instagram, there are stories of Dharmendra which keep coming regularly. There are stories about his films, about his co-stars, about his love life, about his family, his children, all kinds of stories about Dharmendra which keep cropping up all the time. And therefore, one can only draw the conclusion that he was a much loved star of not only of Bollywood, but of the entire country. In fact, he was very popular across all age groups in this country, not particularly only of his age group, but even the young, the very young, they've all heard of Dharmendra and they all love him all across the country. And therefore, it got me thinking that let me do a podcast not so much about Dharmendra's films. I think that so many other programs have already been done about that, but on something, a different aspect of his life. What made him so very popular? And was he representative of something maybe bigger than himself, maybe of his era, that is of the 70s? And that's what I'm going to explore in today's podcast, the 70s, the rollicking 70s, the larger than life 70s, and Dharmendra's central role in that era in Bollywood. Okay, so let's to do this kind of an exercise or to talk about all this. Really, what I must be doing is that I have to compare two eras to the 70s era to make you understand what the 70s are all about. I am, of course, a senior person in that sense because I truly belong to the 70s era, so I'm very familiar with the 70s era. But to make you understand of the 70s, I will have to probably a little bit compare with the era which was before the 70s era and certainly of the present era. And when I'm talking of comparisons, I mean of the kind of actors we had then and the kind of actors we have now to make you understand what was so special about Dharmendra and about the 70s era. As I exploring the theme of the possibility in this podcast, that they went hand in hand. The 70s deserved a star like Dharmendra, and Dharmendra was also a product of the 70s, of the kind of generation that we had in the 70s. So let's start actually from the 70s era. What are the 70s all about? The 70s were a very, very, and I'm talking of India particularly, were a very, very flamboyant, very, very colorful era, but they were also a very, very transformational era. A lot of parameters, a lot of things, a lot of society had started changing in the 70s as compared to the 50s and the 60s. It was a different kind of a generation which had come, a different kind of a generation which was, as I said, was a little larger than life, represented by its heroes, of course, by its heroines. There was a popular line at that of that era, which today might seem like a bit of a sexist line, but I'll still repeat it for your benefit. It was an era when men were men, women were beautiful, and pansies were flowers. We no longer, these sound like very politically incorrect in today's day and age, and I would agree also, but it was a very popular line of that era. It symbolized the era. So the era really was about the fact that on a larger level, India was at that point in time, the real India was emerging in a certain sense. The real India, the heat and dust of India, the anger of India, the dissatisfaction of India with the economic conditions, with the overall sense of underdevelopment, which was very much there. But at the same time, there's this pride in being an Indian at the same time, this fight for social justice in a certain sense, all these various traits. And please remember also that was the time when from the West, certain cultural influences were coming. This was the bit of the post-hippie era, the post-Woodstock era, which by itself was a huge cultural change which had occurred in the West, and that change was also coming in India at that point in time, not only among the educated but among the common people in India. So it was a time of huge cross-cultural crosswinds, I would say, in India at that point in time. And it reflected in the films, it reflected in the heroes, it reflected in the heroines of that point in time. The heroes were more brash, the heroes were more, the word is hirsute. They used to wear these shirts with the hairy chests all being exposed. The women were far more flamboyant, dressed, and we again don't use that word today, but sexily dressed or whatever you want to call it. The comedians were over the top. The villains certainly. I mean, one of the highlights of the 70s era of Bollywood were some of the top class villains of that era. They were completely over the top, but they were so interesting to watch too. People like, to give you a few names like Premnath, Jeevan, Ranjit, these kind of villains. It was not only Dharmendra, but all these wonderful characters. They symbolize the Bollywood 70s. Heroines, of course, like Praveen Babi, Zeenat Aman, Neetu Singh. A lot of these heroines who were flamboyant, colorful in their own way. But as I said, it was a time of huge social and political and economic change in the country, and therefore, to that extent, Bollywood, to some extent, reflected those changes. People say that it was also the era of the angry young man, that is of Amitabh Bachchan. Certainly, the anger was reflected in a lot of the roles which Mr. Bachchan played during that time. But to my mind, the real person who portrayed just about everything in terms of the new India at that point in time was Dharmendra, because he could so easily play an angry man, he could so easily play the comedian, he could so easily play the family man, he could so easily play the devoted son of the mother, the devoted brother to his sister, the flamboyant lover. He was adept in practically any kind of role. So in that sense, Dharmendra was really you can call it the everyman, he could call it the main point man of Bollywood at that point in time, who in a sense kaleidoscoped, who in a sense telescoped, whatever you want to call it, all the various cross-cultural, all the various aspects of Indian life at that point in time. And that life, by the way, was larger than life. Now, I told you in the beginning that if you have to really understand that era and Dharmendra's time and why he was so popular, you have to compare it with the heroes of before and certainly the heroes of today. I'm not even talking of the 80s or the 90s or generations after that. But let's talk of the heroes of today and that of the 50s and 60s. The 50s and 60s were, of course, a lot of the heroes were very, very talented. They were very brilliant. But they were still steeped in a certain tradition, much of it which came from the West, much of it came from a certain kind of, you could call it some kind of an Urdu culture, where the language was in Hindi. There is a word called Shaleen, which was nice language, polite language, to a certain extent flowery language. The people actually in the hot conditions and the films of the black and white era at that time, people used to wear three-piece suits, ties and all that, which of course was, as I said, a hangover of the West. There was no need to wear all those clothes. Now, what really happened in the 70s? What really happened in the 70s? That all these things went out of the window. At one go, the movies reflected the real India. And what was the real India at that time? You know, people like Dharmendra came, even Mr. Bachchan, all these people came. And what did they wear? They wore jeans, they wore t-shirts, they wore shirts with buttons open, you know, showing hairy chest, probably because of the heat or whatever. It started with that, with all those crosses and those chains around their necks. The language was loud. The language was vernacular. The language was, excuse me, the language was, and that is where the Bollywood Hindi language really took off, became a universal language all over the country. It was not that Sanskritized kind of language, it was what is called the Chalu Hindi Bhasha, or the language everybody understood, which everybody could speak. The Hindi doyens of the north could understand it, and so could the Marathi people of Bombay at that time, not Mumbai. They could understand it. People in the south could understand it. People in the east, everybody could understand it. So it was a particular kind of, a masala, chalu, pigged in bhasha, the Hindi of Bollywood at that time. And it was again exemplified in the language with people like Dharmendra, Amitabh Bachchan, Vinod Khanna. All these actors spoke at that point in time. So language was a big thing which made the huge change from the earlier era into the 70s. Then the clothes, as I said, larger than life, like if you remember the film Sholay, take your mind back to Sholay, and the hallmark for me, as far as the dresses are concerned, is that the people like Dharmendra and Amitabh Bachchan in the film, they were wearing jeans jackets, t-shirts. That was the, at that point, jeans and all that were the symbol of rebellion, the symbol of modernity, and they wore that, and people loved that particular kind of gear. So that was the second big thing in terms of the clothing. The action used to unfold on a vast scale. Things, there were these terms called Eastman colors, 70 those kind of screens, colorful, a lot of color. The villains, as I said, were over the top. People like Amjad Khan, people like Ajit. The dialogues are spotted even today. Jeevan, Ranjit, all these Manmohan, all these villains were extraordinary villains at that point in time. The heroines, as I said, were completely glamorous. Excuse me. So it was, as I said, and then it's not only the dress, it's not only the way the people spoke, the new language of communication. As I said, the masala language, the Aam Bhasha, which everybody could understand, the Hindi, which everybody could understand. It was not only that, it was also the milieu, the social setting. No longer the action moved out from the drawing rooms and from the hill stations, which used to be shown in the 50s and the 60s, and the scenario at that time, which used to be shown in film after film after film, were the slums of Bombay. That's right, the slums of Bombay. I mean, I practically every second film I recall at that point in time, which was made, which was shown, showed the slums of Bombay in all its hideousness, in all its reality, in all its, tuta-puta, whatever the infrastructure at that point was, bad roads, water spilling everywhere, people eking out a living, people dressed in all kinds of things, speaking with Chalu Aam Bhasha, the slums. And all the center action, the conflict, everything took place in those slums. That was the real India which was at that time was being shown. Films like Diwar, for instance, showed you the docks of Bombay. What was happening in the docks, which was again a cultural thing, which then stuck on in so many movies after that. These new scenarios, these new scenes, these new milieus, social settings started being shown, and the people lapped it up because this was what was real. This was what they had wanted to see all along. They had probably grown tired of the hill stations and of the, as I said, the nice large bungalows which had no connection to reality in the lives of ordinary people at that point in time. The drawing rooms, all that action shifted, as I said, into this heartland of real India, as it were, the heat and dust of real India, and actors like Amitabh Bachchan, Dharmendra, they picked it up and they brought it across and gave it life on the screen. And why Dharmendra, I would say from the entire pantheon of the 70s actors stood out, there were again great actors like Shashi Kapoor, for instance. Shami Kapoor a little before, but Shami Kapoor was really a 60s star, more than a 70s star. But all these actors, Dharmendra stood out because he had the talent. He had this, uh, it was not only a story of rags to riches story of the boy from Phagwara who made it big in Tinseltown, in India, in Mumbai, in Bombay. It was not only that story, because a rags to riches story is probably a story of every second or third film star who becomes big in Bombay. But Dharmendra's story was special because he had a certain innocence about him. He always, even right, and that's the remarkable thing about this man. You know what? As I said, what stood out for me about Dharmendra was that he, even till his last days when he was dying, and there were a lot of videos now which are coming out, which are terrible videos. I don't know why they have been allowed to come out, but anyway. But also the fact there were some interviews which are taken when he was ill, when he was at his farmhouse in Lonavala. And you could see, the He-Man of the yesteryears, his health had gone, everything had gone, but he still retained that innocence. And that innocence was the innocence of this boy who had struck big in Tinseltown in Bollywood. It was something beyond his dreams. He had won it with his hard work, with all the effort he put in. But he could never get over the wonder of it, that how he had come into all this and he was enjoying this so much. And even the poetry which Dharmendra wrote in his last few days reflected that he could relive that desire, that anticipation, that excitement. He wanted to relive this again and again, right till his last days also. Because this was a man who was grateful. He never took his success really for granted. And that is why this man remained connected to ordinary people. And the people remain connected to this man because they sense this innocence in Dharmendra, that this was a true son of the soil. This was a person who really was somebody who had gone from our midst into that big, wonderful, beautiful, wealthy, rich Tinseltown. He had made it big out there, but the blessings of the people were with him because he deserved it all, because he never lost his connect with the people. That was the speciality of Dharmendra, his innocence. Even on his wasted face when he was dying, and you could still see that innocence in his eyes, that he was so grateful for the life he had. I personally feel completely deserved every bit of it by whatever he had done in his life in terms of this. So that was one of the stellar features of Dharmendra. But there was something else besides, as I said, the language, the dress, the innocence, besides the connect with the people. And that other element was the deeply humanistic foibles and frailties of stars like Dharmendra. What do I mean by foibles and frailties? Some of you might not know, but Dharmendra was, he was a man who was very popular, certainly among the ladies. He had his share of fun, or whatever you want to call it, fair enough. But he was never shy about it in a certain sense. I don't want to get into details of his second marriage and this and that. That is known to everyone. But that also is a part and parcel of his life, of his colorful life, his children, which is great. But he never hid that from people. That's the best part of it. He was always very open about it, which made him a deeply humanistic and a real person, not an artificial person. And then it gave that connect also the people to him, because if maybe you're doing the right thing, maybe you're doing the wrong thing. These judgment calls are taken by people themselves, but he was open about it. He shared that with the people. He never hid it from anyone. He just wanted to be loved by the people, and that is what made him so open and humanistic. And his love affairs, his endearing qualities as a person, these are all there for people to see. In fact, there was a very famous incident where there was this editor, this journalist called Devi of a magazine called Star and Style, if I'm not mistaken. And she had written something about Hema Malini ji. And Dharmendra didn't like it. And reportedly, I mean, I don't know how far this is true, but I think this is quite true that he was drunk. He really liked to hit the bottle. Everybody knows that. He's admitted this also in so many interviews. And he was pretty drunk, and Devi was, I think, and he chased her to, maybe give her a slap or something or whatever. But that famous incident made headlines all over. But the fact is, this man did not even at that time pause to think that this could affect my celebrity status. I need to be careful. I need to be more discreet in my behavior. No, he was. The person he was inside, he was outside. This is what made him so endearing to people, that there was nothing artificial about Dharmendra, and which has made him so very popular. Then there was this column at that time in another film magazine called Stardust, Nita's Natter, if I remember the name of the column. And it always used to be full of stories of Dharmendra. Dharmendra ji ne ajir kara, Dharm ji ne ye kara, Dharm ji, Hema, this, that, whatever. It went on and on and on. But all I'm trying to say is that this generation of stars never hid anything. Now let's come to the present generation. I said I'd compare the present generation with you to make you understand why this generation, these 70s people, had such a special appeal. Today's generation, people like Shah Rukh Khan and all that would be probably 100 times more successful than Dharmendra. Purely in terms of assets, people say that Dharmendra's fortune is maybe about 400 crores. Shah Rukh Khan could be sitting on maybe over 4,000 crores. But that's not the point. I still feel that even somebody like a very successful star like Shah Rukh actually comes nowhere close to Dharmendra, because at the end of the day, I'm not talking about Shah Rukh only, but all actors of the present generation, even some of the new actors, they pale in significance to these stars of the 70s like Dharmendra, Shashi Kapoor, Vinod Khanna, all these stars, because these people were who they were. They did not pretend to be somebody else. Let me give another interesting example. Somebody like a Vinod Khanna. Vinod Khanna was going through depression. He was going through, his marriage had crashed. And then he took to Osho, he took to Rajneesh, he took to, a different lifestyle. Then he went to Pune, he joined that ashram. He was at the peak, at the top of his career, when he disappeared from films completely and just disappeared. The actress Praveen Babi, she of course was mentally ill. I think she was suffering probably from schizophrenia. But the fact is, she was also at the top of her career, and then she also disappeared, and then she made a comeback many years later. Today's generation, and I was talking of today's generation, if you notice, everybody has a well-toned, muscular body. Again, bodies made in gym. Let me put it this, a little artificial. Fine, everybody has a well-toned body, great to look at, wonderful, healthy, wonderful. But there's nothing natural about it. Those stars of the 70s, somebody like Rajesh Khanna, they were not afraid to carry their girth, or some of them are very plump. They were okay with it. Even Dharamji, for that matter, was not some spindly, thin person. He was a muscular man and all that, but he was like a big, beefy man. But they were okay. They were okay with all this. They did not need that we need our six packs. We have to show our six packs, as all the stars today are in the habit of doing. And that's the big comparison, And it's not only in terms of bodies, it's not only in terms of the entire approach beyond a particular point in time. The today's stars, do you know anything about them, about their real lives, their personal lives, how humanistic they really are, despite all the so-called, within quotes, charity work which some of them do, or the NGOs they're attached with, or deeply human trusts and whatever the things they do? You don't know anything. The only gossip or the only thing which you pick up of these stars is when some of them appear in these chat shows with the likes of Karan Johar. Then maybe you get some inkling into, this is what these people probably could be in personal life. But you don't know much. They're all actually the same in today's generation. Well-toned bodies, private lives which are completely hidden from the public, clean. Some of them have very clean habits. Nobody drinks, at least they pretend not to. Nobody smokes, at least they pretend not to. So, in a certain sense, a kind of what is called starless kind of an existence. It's because stars are supposed to be these gods in a way, but gods with feet of clay. That is my definition of a film star. And the 70s film stars were that gods with feet of clay. They all had their weaknesses. Many of them were having these extramarital affairs. Many of them were drinking that famous VAT 69 bottle probably every night. Many of them were, people who made a fool of themselves. They arrived late on the sets, by the way. That was another big habit of the 70s. But at the end of the day, they were very, very deeply human people. They were people you could identify with. But how much today we can identify with this generation or the present crop of actors? As I said, A to Z, they are all the same. They all go to the gym. They all lead these very, very proper lives in the sense that, they all wear the latest clothes which somebody has to wear from, the same kind of handbags the ladies carry, the same kind of clothes, etc. So, all that is fine. But at the end of the day, this generation is what I call a generation which has no striking features. The 70s were a people of striking features. And therefore, and then they come to this last point which I want to make, which a lot of people throw at the 70s generation, that they were colorful personalities, but were they great actors? They say it's people like Nasiruddin Shah and people like, today's actors like Rajkumar Rao and Khurana and all these actors. These are the really great actors. That 70s brand of actors were not such great actors. I beg to disagree. And I'll give you a very, very interesting example. Certainly, the Nasiruddin Shahs and all these other people at the NSD variety, they are very adept at, bringing, supposing if you want to say, you want to show somebody from the rural background or somebody, who is from the working classes, what I call, they do a wonderful photocopy of that and they will present it in front of you on the screen. They do that brilliantly. But can they imbue it with human-like qualities, identifiable qualities which you and I can identify with? I'm not too sure. What this 70s generation of actors really, really did was that they brought these characters to life, to larger than life. And in a very funny way, for instance, if they were portraying, let's say, the underworld don or a smuggler, they attributed those kinkiness, those dress habits, the way of they spoke, some of their dialogue deliveries of these smuggler or of these dons. I'm just giving an example. When later real life dons started imitating what the actors were doing. So it took on a bizarre scenario where some of the characters which they played, those characters in real life actually started behaving like, what these 70s stars used to portray them. So yes, in a photocopy, in a method acting kind of a way, that they were not exactly a facsimile of the roles of real people. They were not that. But they were much more larger than that. They were far more interesting than that. They were far more, you could identify with them. That was a speciality of the 70s generation. And as I said, Dharmendra stood out head and shoulders above all of them because biggest quality was his innocence, and number two, because he had the versatility. Please remember, he was also a very versatile actor. His comedy, for instance, in Sholay, his comedy in Chupke Chupke are among the best comic acts by any actor on Indian screen. Because he was a natural actor. He was not a method actor. He was not a trained actor. He was not from acting school. Nothing of that sort. He hadn't done any theatre. Natural actor, and comedy is the toughest, believe you me. From action, if you're from drama, comedy is the toughest. And he had this impeccable sense of timing as far as comedy was concerned. So he had that versatility where when he landed, as people say, rightly people say, when he landed a punch, it really felt he was hitting a punch. And there were two words which he used to say in all his action sequences. Okay, let me say it. It's in Hindi. It's a bit of an abuse, but let me say it. Kutte Kamine. That was what was the favorite of Dharmendra. But the way he used to say it on the screen was so convincing that you really felt that the villain was really one of these Kutta Kaminas, as he used to say. And when he used to say, "Main badla lunga," then people really felt that he was going to take revenge. That was a conviction. That was the strength of his acting prowess, which he brought on the screen. So, action, romance, comedy, drama, family man, you name it. He's done everything. Spies, he's done. Somehow there's a couple of films which he has made which are never, I don't know why they are never talked about. They were very successful films. One was a film called, I think it was called Lalkar. Then Aankhein, Kismet. These are films where he played spies, and he was very, very convincing in those films. So Dharmendra is this terrific actor with who all kinds of formats he could fit into so easily, even in modern formats, Uh, um, uh, and the director who made Johnny Gaddar, I'm forgetting his name right now, modern age, new age directors, they swear by Dharmendra. They all say that what a great actor he was. And so the legend, the true tribute to the man is that we have to remember Dharmendra really as his deeply humanistic actor more than anything else. Somebody who never lost his connect with the people. Because even when I look at Mr. Bachchan today, I look at all the stars of older who were there in the new generation. Beyond a point, there is only this much of a connect you feel. You don't feel anything beyond that. But with somebody like Dharmendra, when he died, you genuinely felt the tears coming into your eyes. You felt lost. We all felt lost. We all felt forlorn, as if somebody, जैसे एक हिंदी में कहते हैं, मेरा अपना कोई चला गया. It was that kind of a feeling which we had when Dharmendra passed away. He was so deeply, deeply connected with all of us. And therefore, as I said, the 70s, Dharmendra, these are interchangeable things, but they were made for each other. The generation was made for actors like Dharmendra, and Dharmendra was waiting to happen in the 70s generation. It was bound to happen. And that is why that time in our films, that age of the 70s, the time of actors like Dharmendra, it is actually, in a certain sense, it is the golden age, very truly the golden age of Indian cinema. That age can never probably come back. We are, as we go forward, we are getting more and more careful. We are getting more and more, it's like a lot of brilliant, a lot of interesting stuff is made even today. I'm not saying that. But the age of this larger than life, this David Lean kind of a Lawrence of Arabia kind of largeness of cinema, which was encapsulated in the 70s, that age was only that. That age is gone. That probably will never come back. And so on this note, I come to the end of this podcast. Hope you liked it. And on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.